Hi, welcome to Boring Money, Rich Life. I'm your host, Joy Hicks, and today we're going to talk about 401ks because I feel like a lot of us know of them, but might not be super familiar with how they work. Some of us, we actually have them, but we still don't really know how they work. So I thought it would be good to talk about this now as I'm diving into more money topics. So, in one of my earlier videos, I shared with you guys that last year, towards the end of the year, I went to this money seminar. So, it was kind of just like a 1 day seminar where they talked about a lot of different topics. And of course, 401ks came up because I feel like 401ks are kind of like the entryway into investing, especially because of how accessible they are. For most like salary paid jobs, they come with a 401k and their benefits plan. And so that's why 401ks tend to be kind of like the first step into investing, just because of how like easy they are to set up. So back in the day, when factory jobs were kind of like the thing and more blue collar jobs were very popular, we actually had pensions. So, pretty much, if you worked for a company for a certain amount of time, or more than likely, if you retired with that company, they pretty much agreed to give you a certain salary or a certain portion of your paycheck as you were in retirement. And now we really don't have anything like that. I feel like law enforcement might still offer pensions. The government has TSP, but that's kind of more like a 401k. So I feel like these days it's very rare to see a pension. And I think it's because most people do not stay with the same company anymore because really we're not incentivized to. So, like, a pension definitely incentivizes you to stay with a company for the life of that company because they're saying, hey, if you pour into this job, at the end of it, we'll take care of you. But these days, it's not like that. So, I mean, it's not very common now to see people get a new job maybe every 3 to 4 years because we have to increase our income ourselves. So now that we have moved away from pensions, it's pretty much just 401k. And 401ks are pretty much a company retirement plan. So it's still associated with your job, but it's a little bit different because now we are in charge of our entire retirement. So it's no longer like, hey, you do your time here, we're going to take care of you. It's pretty much like they put the entire responsibility on the employee to make sure that they have saved enough money for retirement. Now, the reason why this is so important is because we are living much longer than previous generations have. I think they have even like raised the retirement age because just how long people are living. So, preparing for retirement, I think it's often overlooked because it's like we have all of our current bills now, we have our expenses now, and we want to enjoy life now. So, we're not really thinking about life in 40 or 50 years, to be honest. But as we are wanting to fuel our rich life, now we have to start thinking about it because we're getting into investing now. We're learning about all of these different money tips and things like that. So that's why we're going to talk about this today. So, pretty much with a 401k, like I said, it is associated with your job. So, it's usually set up when you set up your other health benefits. Now, you don't have to opt into your 401k, and I think a lot of people probably are not opted into it, but it's pretty much yearly or when you first get that job that you can kind of enroll. Actually, no, I think the 401k might be the one thing that you can change because I know you can change your contributions throughout the year. So if you aren't enrolled in a 401k and you want to get started into one, I would say contact your job because actually that might be the one thing that you can adjust throughout the year. So I would just look into it. Every company is a little bit different, but typically for initial enrollment, it's going to be when you start that job, or it's going to come back around every year around open enrollment. And with 401ks, I think the reason why people don't know much about them is because, again, your company is kind of setting everything up for you. So your company usually will partner with like an investment firm like a Vanguard or something like that. And they'll say, okay, you're enrolled into X company's retirement 401k provided by this investment firm. And so you don't really get to set up what you're investing in. It's kind of already negotiated, it's kind of already set up for you. Pretty much the only thing that you really decide is how much of your check you want to go towards your 401k and then whether you want to do it or not. But with understanding a 401k, there are two different types of 401ks. So there's traditional, and that pretty much means that your money is tax deferred. So let's say you get paid like $1,000 or $2,000 or whatever for this check. And before they tax your money, they're going to take out whatever you have allotted as your contribution and they're going to put it into your 401k. And then there is a Roth 401k where pretty much, let's say again, you get paid $1,000 or $2,000 or whatever, and then you get taxed first. And so your after tax money is then put into your 401k. So either way, you're putting money into it. But again, traditional is going to be pre tax money. And then a Roth is going to be money that was already taxed that is now going into this account. I am not a financial advisor, so I can't tell you which one is better. But we can kind of talk about what people say, like the reasons why they go with a traditional versus why they go with the Roth. So a traditional, people feel like, okay, this money is going to grow tax-free pretty much. So I'm estimating that this is going to be growing over the next 40 years. And by the time I retire, my taxable income is going to be lower because I won't have a job anymore. And so I'll have a lower tax bracket when I'm ready to take that money out. So that's kind of like the argument for a traditional 401k. And then for a Roth, people are like, well, I want to be rich in retirement. And so I don't want to pay taxes at the end. I rather know what my taxable income is now. And then when I, have built all of these assets and I've done all of this investing, I can just pull my money out. There's definitely pros and cons to both. I think you definitely have to weigh out what makes sense for you. But I think it's important to know that there's two different types because I think most people don't even know that. They just hear 401k and they think it's just the same thing. And you really need to know because that's going to determine how much money you end up with at the end. So I think one of the cons that people say for a traditional 401k is just the fact that everything always gets more expensive. So why would taxes not get more expensive? So if you think about like the taxable income now and you kind of foresee what it could be 40 years down the line, I think that's why people are like, you know what? I'd rather have a Roth because I know exactly what the tax rate is now. And then for a Roth, people are like, well, I'd rather that money grow tax free so I can get the most out of that money. So I think the most important thing is just figuring out which one that you have or which one that you're applying for. And then you can make that wise decision on which one you need. No matter which one that you decide, one thing that you should definitely pay attention to are the fees that are associated with your 401k. So I'll be honest, I was not thinking about the fees at all. And it wasn't until I was kind of diving into some more education that I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense, right? That there are fees associated with it. So, of course, you need to think about how much you're going to be taxed, but you also need to kind of think about the fees as well. In my last video, I was talking about money traps and how oftentimes we can end up overpaying for things. And so I would say, regardless of the type of 401k that you choose, make sure that you know what fees are associated with it. And that is definitely my homework to go and do tomorrow. I will be calling them and just asking, like, okay, how much fees are associated with this? Because one thing to remember, a 401k should not be your only investment strategy for retirement. So you can have a 401k with your job, and then you can also have your own type of like brokerage account with these other financial institutions. I think it is beneficial to have both, but I think as you're figuring out how much money you want to contribute, you're figuring out what type of 401k that you want, you also need to consider how much this is costing you. So if I'm putting in X amount of dollars each year, how much is that going to be when I'm ready to pull that out? So that's something that you should definitely check into as well, because it is going to be different for each type of retirement plan. And then it could also change. Make sure that that's something that you're checking in with at least once a year. One of the reasons why people do like 401ks is because a lot of companies have what's called an employer match. So, pretty much that means that your employer is willing to give you money if you decide to use their 401k. I think that's one of the ways that they try to say, okay, well, we don't have pensions, but we'll help you here. And so every company is going to be different. But, like, for example, I think with my company, they will do a dollar for dollar match. I want to say up to 2%. And then I want to say the remaining 4%, they kind of do like 50 cents per every dollar. Because my company, they have like a 6% match, which I will say is actually pretty good, because nowadays I'm seeing companies who only give you like a 3% match. Some companies don't match at all. So I will say any free money that you can get, I would try to get it. And this is actually pretty new for me, because last year, I think I was only contributing maybe 3% to my 401k. And it wasn't until I went to that money seminar that I was like, okay, let me at least contribute the full 6%, because even if it's just 50 cents for every dollar, that's still free money that you're getting. So I would definitely check with your company and see if they do offer an employer match. The only caveat with that is a lot of times you do have to be what's called vested. So that means you have to work for your company for a certain amount of time in order to take all of their money that they gave you if you were to like leave that position. So, for instance, let's say that you have been at your company for a year and they do have an employer match and they've been giving you some money, and you find a better position and you're considering leaving. You can take all of the money that you contributed. So every dime that was taken from your check, it can be rolled over into another retirement account. It could be rolled over into your new job's 401k if they have one. But if your company has like a vest for maybe 3 years, they're going to be like, okay, well, everything that we put in there, you're not going to get. So I think that's one thing to definitely be on the lookout for. You can always call the people who manage your 401k and say, hey, how long is the vest period or the vested period? Um, what are the requirements for that, regardless? And then every time you look at your balance, make sure you understand the amount that you put in, because they're always going to show you, I guess, like the cumulative total. They're going to show you, oh, this is what you would get if your employer has this and you have that. But make sure you understand what you actually contributed to, especially if you want to leave before that best period or that best cycle. Just because, again, you might have a little bit of confusion in what those numbers actually are. So I will say a lot of times the question comes up of, are 401ks worth it? I think the fact that we know most people don't have like $5,000 in savings, and a lot of the way that people live is by using credit cards. I would say 401ks are definitely a good way to start, because it's money that's out of sight, out of mind, and it's money that can continue to grow. Well, hopefully it grows. But it's money that is specifically being put away for your retirement, especially if you're having a hard time saving money and you're seeing a lot of money going out the door. And I will be honest, money is very psychological. So, like I told you guys at first, I was only contributing 3% because I liked seeing that extra 3% on my paycheck. I was like, okay, with this, I'm doing good. And then once I really started contributing the full 6%, I did, of course, see a difference on my paycheck. But I had to remember, hey, this is for my rich life. Like, this is for my future. I want to actually enjoy my retirement. And I want to get all the free money that this company is willing to give me. So I don't want to miss out on anything extra that I could get. And so you kind of have to retrain your brain to understand, like, hey, I'm gonna be fine. Maybe I do have to cut my expenses so that way it makes sense a little bit, but I do think it's a good way to at least get started. So let's say you do already have a 401k, definitely do your homework and make sure you know your fees, make sure you know what type that you have, and then also just verify what you're contributing, making sure that it makes sense for you. You can always go above whatever your employer is willing to contribute. I mean, I'm just doing 6%. If you wanted to do 25, you could. I mean, there's nothing stopping you, but I would definitely say it's a good way to get started. But just remember that there are other vehicles out there, and we'll definitely start talking about those as well. But this is just, I would say, a good way to at least get started to kind of prepare for retirement. Again, this is not the only retirement vehicle that you could have. So we'll definitely talk about others on this podcast as well. But as always, what is one boring thing that you can do today to start fueling your rich life? I'm your host, Joy Hicks, and thank you for watching. Be sure to subscribe.